By the summer of 2021, life in Cuba was defined by extreme physical and economic strain. A combination of food shortages, frequent blackouts, and a lack of basic medicine during the pandemic created a situation where citizens spent hours every day waiting for essential goods. On July 11th, the social order reached a fracture point. Beginning in San Antonio de los Baños, a spontaneous protest swept through more than 50 cities and towns across the island in less than 24 hours. The crowds were diverse, consisting of young people, parents, and the elderly. Many came from the island's most economically marginalized neighborhoods, marching without weapons or central coordination. They were united by the word libertad and the lyrics of the song Patria y Vida. As footage of the marches reached the internet, the international community witnessed the largest citizen mobilization in Cuba since 1959. While the regime claimed the movement was a foreign conspiracy, the scale of the mobilization suggested an internal breaking point. Decades of pressure had finally pushed the population to publicly challenge the state. The state response to these peaceful gatherings was immediate. That afternoon, the government transitioned from police containment to an active call for civil confrontation. Miguel Díaz-Canel appeared on national television and issued a direct command to his supporters and security forces. The order to combat has been given. It was the first time in modern Cuban history that a head of state explicitly called for his supporters to engage in physical conflict against their own unarmed neighbors. This directive changed the public's understanding of the state. It signaled that the government's continued authority now relied on maintaining a state of military readiness against its own citizenry. In the weeks following the protests, state forces carried out a wave of arrests. Human rights organizations documented nearly 1,500 detentions directly linked to the July 11th and 12th events. There were documented fatalities. Dubis Lorencio Tejeda, a 36-year-old from the La Guinera neighborhood, was killed by a police bullet fired into his back. No charges were ever brought against the officer. The crackdown continued long after the streets were cleared. Authorities used video footage from the protests to conduct house-by-house sweeps, identifying and detaining anyone who had participated in the marches. The legal system was then used to formalize these detentions. Peaceful protesters were prosecuted for sedition in trials without due process, resulting in sentences of 12 to 30 years in prison. 5 years after the uprising, the indicators of state repression have reached levels higher than those recorded during the initial crackdown. Tracking the legacy, 322 original protesters remain jailed since 2021. The system rapidly expanded. Nearly 2,000 entered, totaling over 2,100 political prisoners. By June 2026, a record 1,306 remain active. Demographics also shifted. 40 were detained as minors, with 16 now in adult prisons. The regime has also implemented a strategy of preventive repression. Security forces selectively imprison journalists, pastors, and social media influencers before they can organize or report on new dissent. The state has integrated this surveillance into its daily administrative routine. By targeting those with the influence to report the facts, the system aims to silence the capacity to tell the truth. For many on the island, the significance of July 11 is not found in government reports, but in the specific coincidences of the calendar. In the church calendar, July 11 is the feast of Saint Benedict. He is remembered as the patron who worked to rebuild a new civilization following the collapse of a long-standing empire. The date also marks the birthday of Cardinal Juan de la Caridad, the Archbishop of Havana. His middle name, Caridad, refers to the virtue of charity, a value the state's ideological programs have been unable to replace. These overlaps have provided a spiritual framework for the population. They suggest that while the state uses the date to mark a military order, the community can use it to mark a commitment to charity and reconstruction. This sense of identity has also expanded geographically. The modern Cuban nation now exists in places like Miami and Madrid, functioning as a community that transcends the island's borders. The regime historically used exile as a way to remove voices of dissent. However, this strategy has created a global network that remains deeply involved in the island's future. This exile community has become the living memory of the nation. They provide the financial support and the international advocacy that the state tries to suppress within the island itself. Both those on the island and those abroad are often united by the image of Our Lady of Charity of Alcobre, a maternal symbol that links the imprisoned and the exiled. July 11th did not end the current system of government, but it provided a shared experience of public defiance. 5 years later, the memory of that day serves as proof that the threshold of fear can be crossed. Memory remains the first form of resistance. Patria y vida.